is Shana Orczyk Sissel, who is the founder, Chief Executive Officer, Banríon Capital Management. Thank you so much for joining us. Shana, what are you expecting from this earnings?
So there's been a lot of upgrades by some of the investment banks going into this earnings report, which I find very interesting. I think it speaks to having a sense of the new CEO is doing and making the changes and implementing the things that are going to be able to help the company turn around. But it is very much a turnaround story. Everything that Estee Lauder is doing is about trying to recover to its former glory. There is absolutely depressed earnings. It is impacted by tariffs. It is heavily reliant on China for manufacturing. And so they've got a bunch of campaigns in place in an attempt to help restructure the company and bring it back to high levels of profitability. And what the street is going to want to see is that there's been progress on that front. But don't expect to see, amazing earnings. This is really about seeing progress in their turnaround story.
Right, and no doubt part of that turnaround story, as you mentioned, has no doubt been China. It seems that, in this earnings season that you mentioned the word tariffs. You're getting punished if you're not being able to convince the street that you're trying to address or at least try to sort of mitigate some of those challenges. I'm just wondering what they've been doing as far as that market is concerned. And it seems to be a market also that they pay a lot of attention to the consumer also over in China. That's something I've noticed in recent years, as particularly, these Chinese consumers do tend to look out for the overseas sort of luxury cosmetic brands as well. How are you looking at that story?
So that's two different questions. The first being the importance of the Chinese consumer for Estee Lauder, and that is a true statement. The Chinese consumer is a huge area of potential growth opportunity for the company, and so being able to support and to grow within the Chinese market is important. Now, the second question is related to tariffs. One of the things that Estee Lauder has been doing, which has been a major initiative for them, is trying to move production and operations outside of China to have less impact from tariffs. So they've moved a lot of operations to Japan and parts of Europe, and they're doing that in an attempt to circumvent some of the punishment of tariffs of having too much of their production and operations in China proper.
What can we glean from the peers in this space as to what we've heard so far from some of the competition as to what we're likely to hear from Estee Lauder?
Well, I don't think you can make a comparison there, again, because this is really a turnaround story. One of the things that a lot of beauty brands have done very successfully that Estee Lauder still hasn't really figured out yet is to properly harness the influencer economy and the power of social media. Today, that's where a lot of the TikTok community and the like gets a lot of their beauty brand advice, and a lot of the beauty brands that they want to work with comes from that influence. And so Estee Lauder has not done a great job with that, even though they have some of the premier beauty brands like MAC, like Tom Ford, like Clinique, but other up-and-coming smaller brands have been able to take share by harnessing that influencer community, being available in the Sephoras, in the Ultas, something that Estee Lauder has been slow to adopt. And so it's really hard to make any connection between their competitors' reports and Estee Lauder's, because Estee Lauder is really in a turnaround situation, and some of their peers really aren't experiencing the same thing. So what we look for in Estee Lauder to feel like it's a successful quarter is not necessarily what we would expect from others. Now, that said, demand and what we've seen in terms of consumer spend in cosmetics does matter. It basically tells us what the opportunity set is for Estee Lauder, but none of that really matters if they can't figure out the Beauty Reimagined campaign and figure out how to ensure stability in their revenues going forward.
No, it's very important to very much differentiate this business as far as being a very unique story in this space, because typically with earnings we do look to peers for any sort of hints or clues, but you make a very interesting point. So no doubt investors in the street will be looking out for some reassurances very much around some of those strategies, particularly with regards to influencers and some of their marketing campaigns. Also, of course, wanting to get a bit of a pulse check, no doubt, on the state of the consumer, given that that's just been a big focus given some of the macroeconomic challenges as well. But it's been a fascinating chat. We're going to have to wrap it up there, but thank you so much for your really useful analysis and insight ahead of that report card that we'll be getting tomorrow. Shana Orczyk Sissel joining us there from Banríon Capital Management. Well, that does it for us. Thanks so much for joining us here on